Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. This webinar is an opportunity to review information for judges prior to our state contest, which we are holding on April 26th. We are so grateful for your help, and so we want to start by saying thank you. This is not possible without judges. Judges provide incredible feedback for students so that they can continue to grow and work on their projects. And so it is an essential part of National History Day in Indiana, and it cannot be done without your help. So we really, really appreciate it and want to say thank you just to get started. So the webinar agenda for this evening, we're going to review the contest structure and schedule. If you have judged with us previously, or if you've only judged at regionals, this is going to look a little bit different because state functions a little bit differently than our regional level contests. And then we're going to go into the annual theme. We'll talk about the contest rule book. Then we'll talk about the project types that will be present at the contest. We'll review the student interview process. I'll review some reminders about ranking and evaluation and how that works for projects. We'll then talk about the judge resources that we have available for you, so that way you can feel as prepared as possible for contest day, and then we'll wrap up and just remind you of some contact information. So this is going to be our structure for the day. If you attended webinars in the past, there will be stuff that you have seen before. I've tried to restructure and reformat so it's fresh and engaging. But I've tried to also then focus it on the state contest and what's important to remember for that particular contest, because it does function a little bit differently than regionals does. So let's talk about that contest structure and schedule. First, we start off with what is your role that day. The goal of the judge is to encourage students to keep learning by providing constructive feedback on evaluation sheets that we provide. We're going to go through what those evaluation sheets are, how to provide constructive feedback, all in this webinar today. You also rank student projects using not only those evaluation sheets, but then you'll use obviously the project materials themselves to rank student projects for us. This helps us determine which projects will be advancing to either finals or to the national competition. The big thing about this particular contest is that your rankings at this contest will help us determine which projects are going to be eligible to compete at the national competition this June in College Park, Maryland. So it's a big deal. It's really important, and that's why your role is so essential, because it's not possible without you. So we'll talk about how that all works. Basically, we are going to be working to, determine what those projects are, and the top 2 in every single division and category have the opportunity to compete at the national contest. So how do we accomplish these goals? We start by providing constructive comments that help students understand why they were ranked, why they were evaluated the way that they were. We accomplish this by, making sure that we are working together as a team in your judging groups to come to a consensus on your rank and evaluation, determining based on the rubric, based on the provided materials, which projects best fit, best meet this criteria. We always want to be aware of bias when we're making our rankings and evaluations. So, a project could be, a really important topic or a really popular topic, but did they meet the criteria on the rubric? That's what we should be using to make our decisions as judges. So, there's a lot. We'll talk a little bit about how we all accomplish these goals and how you're going to work together to determine the rankings for the projects that you're going to see. So prior to contest day, different project types are going to have different requirements as we prepare for contest. We'll talk a little bit about each of these categories in a little bit, but I wanted to give you a preview of what is a part of each one. So paper and website judges, you are going to get written materials, which includes the title page, process paper, annotated bibliography, and the student entry itself before the contest. So this week, by the end of the week, hopefully, we will be sending you the papers and the websites if you have been assigned to judge paper and website. We have not announced judge assignments yet, so that you will also be receiving those after this, later this week after this webinar. So you're going to review those prior. It's just difficult to read a whole paper or to review a whole website on one contest day, so we want to make sure you have time to do that prior to the contest. So you can start to complete those initial evaluation forms. You can start looking at those evaluations and looking at those websites and papers and determining, where do you think this project falls when looking at the rubric. You're going to get access to these materials about 1 week before the contest. You will then, on contest day, meet with the students. And then after you have the student interviews, you'll come back to our Judge HQ, and that's where you'll discuss the ranking that you are going to make as a group for those projects. Exhibit, documentary, and performance are going to review written materials. So they will also have the opportunity to see the title page, process paper, and annotated bibliography prior to contest. This is a great way to kind of get introduced to what the project is going to be about, and you can kind of see what the research is that the students have done, but then you will evaluate those entries on site. So you will view the exhibit on the contest day, you will view the documentary, and you will view the performance on that day. If you judged with us during regionals, then you might know this already, but this year we started the transition to online feedback. So you have the option to either handwrite or type your feedback. We are using our project paperwork and feedback system, ZFairs. This is our online contest management system. This is how we set everything up. So all judges who signed up and completed our permissions and waivers will have an account created for them to access student work. We are creating accounts for all judges, even if you are, as long as you've completed those permissions and waivers, you will have an account created for you, no matter if you're handwriting or typing. If you choose to handwrite, this gives you the option to access this account to see that student work that I mentioned on the previous slide. So you can see that process paper, you can see that annotated bibliography, you can start to do that review. But then we know on contest day, you'll come and you'll actually handwrite your feedback. If you're typing, then everything that you do is housed in that online system. So we have not created judge accounts yet for this particular contest. You will receive that login information from the online feedback system when Claire creates those accounts and makes that all and sets that all up. You'll use that login information to access the student projects and all the materials. And it's a really nice way to keep everything kind of in one place. So I am going to go through the basics of how the online system works. So if you are new to judging, or if you are planning to type your feedback, just as a refresher so you understand how this new system works. So when you want to access the project materials, they'll be available through ZFairs. We're going to still send the papers and websites out via email, so you have multiple ways to see them if you are judging papers and websites. But Claire's going to contact you when all of these materials are ready to go. What you'll do when you log in is you'll log into the specific contest. So that would be the state contest, which Claire will provide you a link directly to that website. Then you're going to click on the judging in the top navigation bar. You'll see it just says judging. There's a little gavel. And then you click judge portal. And what will appear there once we've assigned you to a judging group is all of the information about the projects you're going to see and access to their paperwork. We have not done that yet, but it will happen prior to contest. So if you want me to, I've created an overview video that is about 10 minutes long, but it walks through the whole entire process and walks through how you complete judging feedback online. It's an easy way kind of just to follow along. And we'll talk about where you can access that in a little bit, but it is in that judge resource folder. So just so you can kind of see what it looks like, this is an example of what you might see when you log in and click on that judging portal. So at the top, it'll list the category and division that you are providing feedback for. So in this example, this person is providing feedback on senior individual documentary and senior individual performance. You'll see that here. Then it will have tabs for each of the different divisions and categories for you. And then it will list each of the projects and information about how to access them or to access their paperwork. So you'll see it'll say room materials, click to open, it'll open that document for you. So again, there's a written and a video description of how this whole process works if you're interested in reviewing that prior to contest. So at the state contest, we see 3 divisions of student participation. We see youth, which is grades 4 and 5. We see juniors, which is grades 6 through 8. And then we see seniors who are grades 9 through 12. We then see 5 different categories: paper, website, performance, documentary, and exhibit. I'm going to review those again later on, just some reminders about those. But we will see group and individual projects in all of those categories except paper. Paper has to be done by itself. Otherwise, we will see a variety of categories and divisions at this contest. So this is a little bit of a difference. If you have judged for us previously at regionals, this is the structure of the day is a little bit different at state. So judge's schedule for the day. This is what you can expect as an NHDI judge on contest day. 8 a.m. you're going to arrive for judge orientation. We're going to have some treats, some breakfast for you. You'll sit down for judge orientation, and I will give about a 35 to 40 minute just refresher morning of, hey, here's the things to remember. Think about these things. Just kind of the stuff that I didn't fit into the webinar, and the stuff that we think is really important to review morning of. From 9 to noon, we will do preliminary student interviews and project evaluation. So this is when you will go view the exhibits or watch the documentaries, see the performances, or will you meet with the website and paper students. This is that preliminary first round of judging. So we'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit. Once you're finished with those student interviews, you return to Judge HQ, and this is where you will complete rankings for us and then write your feedback over lunch that we have provided. And then from 1:30 to 3, we have finals round, which is the second round of judging for the students who have made it to the next round. And then from 3 to 4, we finish. That's when you would be finishing finals round feedback if you are a finals judge. The student schedule for the day follows pretty similarly. They check in from 8 to 9 when you're in orientation. They are getting their preliminary judging from 9 to 12. From 12 to 1 is when the public can view the exhibits. And then from 1:30 to 3 is when they participate in finals round judging if needed. Excuse me. And then from 4 to 5, we have the award ceremony where we will announce who will move on to the national competition and who wins some special prizes that we have available. So the big difference between a regional and a state competition is the finals round. There is no separate webinar for finals, so you got to think about a lot of the same principles apply. All of the same principles apply for finals. You are just looking at the final remaining projects, making that determination which projects are going to advance, how you're going to rank the final projects that have made it to finals. You're going to receive an email from Claire with your assignments. It looks like this year we are going to have specifically judges who are preliminary judges and judges who are finals judges. We are going to have a very limited amount of judges who judge both. We might not have many at all. So even if you signed up for preliminary and finals judging, you might be assigned to one or the other. Just as a heads up for you, make sure to check that email that Claire sends out so you know exactly when you're judging and when to show up, and when, where you need to be when. So you'll meet at the Judge HQ at 12:45 for the day of orientation, before you start finals round projects. The big difference about finals is that it does not include student interviews. So all those final round judging, all of it is closed to the public, pretty much except documentaries. Documentaries, we still ask the students to come in and play the documentary for you, but you will not ask them questions, and none of the other projects you're going to have interviews during that time. So judges who are in finals round exhibits are just going to go back to the exhibit hall and view those exhibits again. We'll have the papers and websites pulled up for you in Judge HQ where you can review them there. There's no interview during the finals round, because at the end of the day, and something really important to remember with National History Day, is that the project needs to stand on its own. The interview is a very important part of that process, but the interview should not determine that rank when it comes to actually ranking projects. Projects need to stand on their own, and the research needs to stand on its own. So something important to keep in mind. Okay. We're going to go ahead and talk about the annual theme and the contest rulebook. This is kind of what everything is shaped around. Every year, the National History Day, chooses an annual theme, and all projects are meant to be focused or connected to that particular theme. So the 2025 contest theme is Rights and Responsibilities in History. The key thing to remember with this particular theme is that there is an and. This means that all projects need to address both rights and responsibilities. They cannot just talk about one, they have to talk about both. And so that is a really important piece when you are evaluating projects, is does the project fully connect to the theme? Do I see a clear connection to the idea of rights and a clear connection to the idea of responsibilities? Every year, the National Office puts out a theme book. We have a digital version of that available to you in our judge resource folder, and it also includes a kind of summary and overview of the theme. So I think it's a really good way to get yourself introduced, especially if you're thinking about, well, what rights could they cover, or what responsibilities could they cover? There's a wide variety, and it's important to remember that there's not one particular right or responsibility that they have to talk about, but they do need to make a strong argument for that particular right and responsibility that they choose. They might talk about multiple rights and responsibilities. It's about the quality of the argument at the end of the day, and do they address both? All contests are structured around a contest rulebook that is provided by the National Office. We have a digital copy of that in our judge resource folder so you can see the complete rulebook. If you've never judged for us before, I would recommend taking a glance through it so you can kind of understand the rules that students need to follow. We also have project-specific instructions in that judge resource folder. So once you know your judging assignment closer to contest, it might be a good idea to go look at that and look at, okay, what are we exactly looking for when it comes to a website, or what are we looking for when it comes to an exhibit? We will also have physical copies of this for you on contest day, so that way you can review and look through that contest rulebook, or refer back to it as you're completing your evaluations. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about project types. At the contest, we're going to see all 5 different types of projects at the contest this year. There shouldn't be any overlap, so you should be looking at one particular type of project. in your particular judging group when you are assigned. So I want to talk through just a couple of reminders, things to keep in mind when we're thinking about these projects. So we'll start with performance. You might think of like a play or a monologue. It is a crafted performance put on by the students. It is 10 minutes maximum. And they need to be able to fit their performance within that time frame. It can be less than 10 minutes, but it cannot be more than 10 minutes. So it needs to be set up and torn down by the students themselves. They cannot receive help from other students who aren't in the performance, from their teachers, from their parents. They need to be able to set it up and tear it down themselves. And they have 5 minutes to do so before and after. Usually it does not take that long for them to get set up. They should be using appropriate costumes and sets. And then you are going to have 20-minute judging time slots with that particular project. So I think of it like 5 minutes, they come in, they set up. Whenever they're done, you can go ahead and get started. They have 10 minutes to perform. A majority of them will fit somewhere within the 7 to 10 minute range. So it might not go the whole 10 minutes. And then you have time for questioning. I say about 5 minutes for questions, and then they tear down so the next group can get started. So you just want to make sure, it's really important that performance keeps to their schedule. So keeps that in mind, especially when you're thinking about questioning. What questions can you ask the students that you know will keep it to about 5 minutes of questions, and then you can move on. As a reminder, performances are open to the public. So other people, other students, other teachers, parents might come in to watch the performance. You just be mindful of the fact that that's happening. We ask, and there's a sign outside your door that says people shouldn't enter and exit during a performance, but you can also monitor your space to make sure that's how that goes. Documentaries are also 10 minutes maximum. Documentaries are a crafted, video documentary about a particular topic. So that is 10 minutes as well. Again, can be less than 10 minutes, cannot go over 10 minutes. They, at the end of their documentary and supposed to fit within the 10 minutes, are supposed to provide credits. You think about what you see at the end of a movie. This is a brief list, but it's not the full citations. So you should not expect to see the bibliography information copy and pasted and listed as a credits. So for example, they might list credits and they'll say Library of Congress. You can then go to the bibliography to confirm, okay, what did they use from the Library of Congress? So don't expect to see full citations within the credits. That's what the bibliography is for. That is also a 20-minute judging slot. So think of it as a couple minutes to get set up, to get their documentary pulled up on the computer, play the documentary, and then whatever remaining time you have left, you can use for questions. Documentaries are also open to the public, so be mindful of the space, as people shouldn't enter and exit during a documentary. Paper is a paper, so 15 to 2,500 words. A couple of things to keep in mind: most of these papers are MLA or Chicago style. They should be MLA or Chicago style, so they can use footnotes, endnotes, in-text citations, whatever matches with that particular style that they have chosen. You are going to read these ahead of time, and you will then read the paper. Sometimes a paper will include an appendix or an added information. This should include only items such as maps, pictures, graphs. But in the rule book, if you review it, you'll see that it should be limited, the amount of information in the appendix. Read ahead of time. You'll have a 15-minute judging slot. This is mainly just a time to ask them questions about their work. You've read it ahead of time, so it's just going to be mainly, think of it like a conversation, right? Ask them questions, give them time to explain their paper to you. This is closed judging, so it's just going to be your judging group and the student with their paper. Website is a 1,200 word limit on that using the NHD Web Central, which is their online website creation software. They will credit all materials on the website. They should, so if they put a picture, there should be a credit underneath it, but the full citation will be in the bibliography. So make sure to double check that and think about, are they citing everything that they're putting on the website? You will be given the website ahead of time to read through and go through. It'll also be 15-minute judging time slot. So you think of it like a paper, talk to them about their website, discuss it, give them time to show off the research and work that they did. Websites are open to the public. So keep that in mind as well. I always recommend think about it as you are having you're asking them questions. They shouldn't present their website to you. And this is something to keep in mind with all of our projects. They are not going to prepare a presentation. They are expecting questions from you. So it is important to remember, do not expect them to have a whole 15-minute presentation or description of their project. This is especially important for exhibit. Obviously, performance and documentary, they're going to show you or perform. But during the interview portion, they are expecting questions. So just keep that in mind. Last, but certainly not least, exhibits. Exhibits has a very strict 500-word student-composed word limit. So what that means is student-composed words. This is an important distinction to make. Student-composed words do not include primary sources, citations, or quotations. So for example, if they've put a quote on their board, those words don't count towards their word limit. They put a newspaper clipping on their board. Those words don't count towards their word limit. But their analysis, the words they wrote themselves, those count. Their headings, their titles, all of that kind of stuff, that counts. So they should credit all material in their exhibit. So they put a picture, they should have a caption, and then a full citation in the bibliography. The exhibit hall is closed judging. So we do have one big exhibit hall. So all of our judging groups for exhibits will be in the exhibit hall. But that's it. Just because there's so many judging groups usually, it can get loud and distracting and you're standing next to an exhibit. So we try to keep it focused on the students and the judges in that space. You will have 15-minute judging slot. This is a time for you to ask the student about their project, ask them questions, some of that stuff. An important thing to remember, in particular with the state contests and exhibits, we ask that students try to set up prior to judging starting. We try our best, but you have to remember that some students are coming from 3 hours away with a time change. This is a state contest, so we have students coming from every corner of Indiana. So it might take them time to get here. They might arrive just a few minutes ahead of their judging. That shouldn't affect anything. And, we ask them to do it, respectfully as they know that judging is going on. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into what that interview process is going to look like for you, and how it should go on contest day. There are 3 steps, I would say, to a student interview: the greeting, the reviewing of project materials, if it applies, and the actual interview itself. So we're going to start step 1. You want to greet the students. You want to introduce yourself. Take their lead on handshakes, just kind of whatever they are comfortable with. And then you want to give them explain the judging process a little bit. We want to put them at ease. We want to make them feel comfortable. As a reminder, the interview is not on the rubric, so it's not a determining factor when you end up completing that evaluation, right? So this is just an opportunity for students to show off the work that they did, and really an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about what that research process was like. Ask for the annotated bibliography and process paper. They should have a printed copy for you. We will have digital copies, but some projects still have the opportunity to work on them up until contest day. So if they made any changes, they're going to give you an updated copy. That applies to documentary, performance, and exhibit. That does not apply to paper and website. And then ask them to set up their project. Website, performance, documentary is going to have to set up some stuff. Paper and exhibit, it's already going to be ready to go. So a couple of reminders. Here's what I kind of recommend as your process or the steps that you follow. So exhibits, you walk up to the next entry, you introduce yourself, you ask for that process paper, annotated bibliography, and then you just explain, we're going to ask you some questions, we're gonna ask you some questions. Tell us a little bit about your exhibit, or you just start off with a question of what's your project about. Just kind of start the conversation. Papers, you're gonna call in the entry. You're gonna introduce yourself. Then you're gonna ask for the paperwork, but you're gonna explain that you've already reviewed it. You already know. You've already read it. And then you're going to explain the process before asking questions. So you just tell them you're going to have a conversation and ask them questions about their paper. Documentary and performance. You're going to call up the entry, introduce yourself again, ask for the paperwork, and then you might tell them to go ahead and start setting up, and then you'll get started once they're done setting up. Websites, same thing. Call up the entry, introduce yourself. You can ask them for their process paper and annotated bibliography, but explain that you've already reviewed it, you've already seen it. And then just tell them that you're gonna, discuss their website with them and have a conversation. So you want them to feel comfortable. You want them to know that, hey, this is we're gonna ask you questions about your project, and this is how that process is gonna go. Step 2, review project materials. This is just, there might be a little bit of time, as a project is getting set up. So there's a way that you can kind of start to review some stuff. Website and paper, you've already read them, you've already reviewed them. Documentary and performance, it's an opportunity for you to flip through that process paper and annotated bibliography. As you're getting set up, you could think of a question to ask about their research. Exhibits, because they're going to be standing right there in front of you, it's, you don't want to just stand there and stare at the exhibit while they're staring at you waiting for a question. So you might do a quick glance through of the text of the exhibit, or flip through the paperwork real quick if you need to, but then you want to go ahead and start asking questions. You want to start that conversation with them. There will be time to review materials after the interview and back in Judge HQ. So it's important to remember, focus the interview time on the student. And then step 3, we're going to interview the students. We want to remember that they are the experts. We want to put them at ease, make them feel comfortable. They are, we want them to feel like, they got to talk about their work and they're so excited. A lot of them are going to be really, really, really excited to share with you what their process was like, the kind of research they did, the cool things that they found, how they put together their project. Give them that opportunity. They want to share that information with you. So we ask that you focus questions. Please focus on questions where students can showcase their work and research. And we ask that you save any feedback for the evaluation forms. You might want to, say, oh, you could have done this or you could have done that. But we really want them to feel like they had an opportunity to showcase what they did. So we ask you to save the feedback until you can write it down. We want them to be doing most of the talking during this time. So we're going to provide you with a sample list of questions. We recommend that you use those. You pick a couple from the list and maybe you focus on those, or you split up. Maybe I'll ask about, this judge asks about research, this judge asks about how they built their project. You could split it up that way. But some sample questions: why did you choose this topic? What didn't you have time to put in that you wish you could have added? What's your most important source, or which one do you think has a big impact? And then what did you learn by doing this project? So think about the types of questions you want to, you want to ask. I tried it when I was a judge, and I judged for this program several years before becoming the coordinator. I always tried to think about, can I keep my questions consistent between judging groups, so I can give these students kind of a similar experience as, between each project that I see. Okay. Thank you so much for sticking with us. We just have a little bit more to review, and I appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to go ahead and transition into how do we rank and how do we evaluate when it comes to, you've done the interview, you've looked at the projects, you've done all that review. What does that ranking and evaluating look like? So to finalize your judge duties, this is kind of these last steps. We start with coming to a consensus as a team. The goal is that you will be with 2 other people, so there will be a group of 3. We want you all to come to a similar stance on the projects that you're reviewing. So you view projects and discuss each individually with your team. You want to be, you want to look at the projects on its own, and then you will rank them once you've kind of gotten an opportunity to look at each one individually. We want to make sure that all rules violations or comments align. And this is what's really important, is that when you're doing that evaluation, you think about students are going to be handed 3 judge feedback forms. If they're drastically different, that's going to leave the student confused. So we want them to be similar. So no polar opposite evals is what we try to achieve. Rank sheets need to be completed first. And I know once you get there on contest day, that might feel a little counterintuitive because you want to fill out the rubrics and then rank them. The reason that we ask you to review a little bit before you come on contest day, and the reason that we ask you to discuss as a group, is because we need those rank sheets first so we can determine who's going to move to the next round, or who's going to be ranked in the top and be eligible for nationals. We can't do anything. We can't move the contest forward until we have rank sheets turned in. So that's why it's so critical that that's one of the first things that you complete as a team. So what I kind of, and how I kind of functioned when I was a judge, and what I recommend for judges, is to talk through everything, talk through each of the projects, make sure that you're pretty much on the same page, rank them, and then go finish the evaluations. You can write your comments after the ranking is done. Everybody needs to sign that ranking sheet and return it to Claire. We're going to have 2 versions of that rank sheet. We're going to have a virtual version and a paper version. We are going to ask that you submit both because we like to have extra copies. And it also helps us, double check and make sure that we are moving on the correct projects. So that is what Claire's duty is during contest day, is to just kind of run that space and make sure that that occurs. After you submit rankings, then you can go and complete that rubric and write those comments. That's the opportunity to kind of take your time and write the comments that you think will help students as they, for their projects. All evaluations need to be completed and turned in before leaving the venue. We need to make sure that we can get that feedback forms to students. So you need to check in with Claire before you do that before you leave. So let's talk about deliberating on rankings. When you finish your student interviews, we ask that you return to student HQ. I know it might feel, you might want to stay in your judging space, especially if you're in like a classroom or something. We ask you to return to Judge HQ because 1, that's where lunch is. And 2, it's a really, because we're going to be on a college campus, we're going to be spread out between multiple buildings. So if we can't find somebody, it makes it harder to make sure that we can move the contest forward. So we ask that you return to Judge HQ so we know where you are. First task, determine your rankings. We need this to happen so we can prepare for finals. So reach that consensus. On the screen, you're going to see an example of what a ranking sheet might look like. So a couple things to notice. It'll say your judging group at the top, and then it'll list the times that you saw those projects, the entry numbers for those projects, and then the titles. It'll also have a box where you will write the rank for me. So it's numerical. So 1 is the top in the room, and then you go 2, 3, 4, so on. If you have no-shows or a project that doesn't show up, you do not rank that project. This must be completed and turned into Claire at the Judge HQ. And then once you've completed this, you can complete your feedback. So let's talk about the criteria that you are going to use to make this determination. And I know this is a lot of information, so I want to make sure you have this ahead of time, and we'll talk about where you can go and review this after this webinar. So 80% of your decision on contest day is going to be the historical quality of the project. So this is, you think about the research and the work and the analysis that they did. 80%. 20% is then the clarity of presentation. So you think about the written materials, the performance itself, the technical aspects of it, the audio visual aspects. A project can be the coolest exhibit that you have ever seen in your entire life. They did such intricate work, and it's really important as part of this. But if the research doesn't match the quality of the construction of the exhibit, for example, then that might impact, right, how you would rank that, because 80% of that decision should be based on the research that they did and the quality of the argument that they made. So in addition to the actual project itself, you will also be looking at the title page, the process paper, the annotated bibliography. I've given you some examples of what a title page should look like. It's the basic information, so you know what the title of the project is, who the project belongs to, what division and category they're in, how many words are in their particular project. If you have never judged a National History Day project, a very important piece of the project is the process paper and the annotated bibliography. So the process paper describes to us how they chose their topic, how they conducted their research, how they created their project, and how their project relates to the theme. So it should be a description for you, so you can kind of get an idea of, okay, this is why the student chose this project. It's a good way to kind of use that as a way to start the conversation of, you talked about this, tell us a little bit more about that. The annotated bibliography is where we find their sources. So they should annotate them, which means they tell us what the source is and how it was used in their project. It should be a very, very short description. It shouldn't be longer than 2 to 3 sentences. Then they should divide that bibliography between primary sources and secondary sources. This is really important, so that way you as a judge can determine, did they do enough primary source research? Did they do a wide variety of research? As that is part of the rubric that we ask you to look at. So as a reminder, primary sources are things that directly relate to that particular topic. So it could be letters, speeches, diaries, particular newspaper articles. Secondary sources are, they provide analysis or factual evidence of a topic. So that would be things like a documentary or a textbook or a modern article, not from the particular time period that the student is talking about. So this is the evaluation sheet that you will be using on contest day. You're either using a paper copy that looks like what it looks like on the screen, or you're using a digital version, which is just that made into digital form. So the boxes are, you can click the boxes to select them, and then there's a box for you to type all your feedback. So the way this works is we provide you with a evaluation sheet per project. At the top, you'll find entry information. So in that white space next to where it says documentary, That's where you can expect to see some information about the project, the title, the time, that information. Then you'll see the historical quality criteria. So again, 80% of that decision is made using the front part of this evaluation form. And then you have a space to write about strengths and improvements. Side 2 is the clarity of presentation criteria, and then it's the rules compliance checkboxes. So this is just for us to be able to determine were any rules violated, were there any rules issues with this particular project. So when it comes to rules, this is an important point to make. Students, there might be a rule infraction that you might encounter. So for example, a documentary might go longer than 10 minutes. There is a difference between a minor and a major infraction. So a minor infraction is something that doesn't provide a competitive advantage. So they they put their school name on a process paper, they exceeded the word count by less than 10 words. This is something that you want to note this in the comments, but this shouldn't prevent an entry from advancing if it's very minor. Right? You can consider this as a way to break a tie. This is what I recommend. So if you have two entries that are very, very similar, but one goes over by like 2 words, it should rank below the other one. A major infraction is something that would provide a competitive advantage. They went well over the word limit, or their board is like several inches larger than it should be. This is something that we ask you to tell us, okay? In cases where you're concerned about a major infraction, first thing you should do, tell Claire. Claire will tell you what to do, or she'll tell me, and then I can give you guidance on what to do next. We ask that you don't leave that, you don't make that decision without consulting us, just because, we've done this, so we know the rules, and we want to make sure that, nobody gets disqualified or knocked down in ranking just because of maybe a misunderstanding of the rules. So we just want to make sure, and we want to double check those types of things. Disqualification would be a step beyond that, and that would be something that we would determine or tell you what to do. So another thing to keep note of is please alert Claire if you suspect any of the disqualifying offenses. So things like plagiarism, reusing an entry or part of an entry from a previous year, they cannot reuse projects, tampering with another student's entry, or entering a project in multiple contests or entry categories. Those are very extreme scenarios, most likely not to happen. But if they do, tell Claire, we'll tell you what to do. Okay. Just as there are a couple of pieces here, you're going to see the column headers on the rubric. They follow a style of exemplary, proficient, developing, novice. So when you're discussing the evaluation form with your fellow judges, you need to figure out, where does this fall on the rubric? Does it happen consistently, mostly, somewhat, or limited? You want to choose the description that is most true based on the project that you're viewing, not how the project compares to other projects. So we want to try to evaluate projects according to the rubric on their own when you're filling out that form. I listed the 80%, the key definitions, the important things to remember. The 80% of your decision is historical quality. So a couple things I just want to review that on the rubric that you'll see when you encounter it on contest day. One of the most important parts of this is their argument. So the historical argument is the central point of the project. All projects should have a thesis or an argument. It makes a connection to the theme, and it shows why it's significant. All projects should have engaged in wide research. So they looked at a variety of sources. So not just websites, or not just one book, but multiple books, articles, credible websites, different primary sources. We want to look at their primary sources specifically. Did they use a variety of them? And did they seek out primary sources that worked and helped with their particular research? Did they put their project into context of the time period? So this might include relevant social, economic, intellectual, religious, cultural, political conditions of the time and place. Whatever their particular topic relates to, they should think about the context of it. So, if they're doing an economic topic, they should talk about the larger economic context of the time period they're talking about. They might be looking, and we ask that they look at multiple perspectives. So, there might be one point of view or one person's experience or one side of the story. We ask that they look at multiple and they include those in their project. Historical accuracy is just making sure that they didn't leave anything out, that they have accurate, credible information. This really only historical accuracy, you might be ranking lower if they forget important details that they should have addressed. But most of their information should be historically accurate at this level. Significance in history is the impact or consequences of a topic, both short and long term. So they might address both or either. You want to look for impact. You want to look for the so what, why was it important? And you want to look for the scale. They might be looking at a local topic, or they might be looking at a global topic. Both are great. Success of a project should not depend on the scale of impact. We're going to have a lot of students that want to talk about one particular local issue or one historical event, and that's absolutely great as long as they've discussed and thought about its larger significance, its significance overall. Student voice, and this is the one that I think it's really important to review, is the ideas and analysis of the student. So it's that their argument is clear and that there's a balance between their words and the sources that they use. So my example of this is there's ways that student voice might be lost in a project. So for documentaries, they might have really long video clips and then you don't hear the student talk for like 3 minutes. Their paper might have really long block quotes that distract from their own analysis. Their exhibit or website might overuse quoted material, and then it's hard for you to find their analysis. We want to find a nice balance. Something important that we just want to mention is that there is, as AI becomes more widely used, it can be used by NHDI students for brainstorming or for looking for resources or reviewing their writing for grammar, but they can't use it to create their project. This mostly shouldn't come up unless you have a concern, and if you have a concern, talk to Claire. But believe students what they say during an interview. If you see that they've provided they've cited a AI tool in their annotated bibliography, you might ask them how they used it, but it shouldn't go beyond that. And it's mainly just there so in case something, anybody uses it or has a question about it. Okay, we're coming towards the end. So one of the last things you do as a judge is you write comments for us. So comments are the way you can explain to the students why you evaluated them on that rubric the way that you did. So they are a really, really key piece. And I know it's hard. It can be difficult. And I know this as a judge that you've just talked all day and you've walked around and then you got to write all these comments. But I ask, that's why we want to give you time to write them. And we ask you take that into consideration that students, this is their one place where they're going to get feedback from you. So we want it to be clear, and we want them to understand, why they got evaluated the way that they did. So I like to write a comment sandwich. You want to start positive, you want to provide those constructive comments, and then you want to end positive. You want to phrase clearly and provide them action items. I think about it as like, what can they do after this to continue to work on their project? So comments like, fantastic performance, best one today, love your topic, this performance deserves a top award. Those comments don't tell a student how to improve. Something like good job or awesome props can be a great way to start, but we need to continue from there. They don't tell them what they actually did well or why were they awesome props. We ask that you also don't say things like best one today or this performance deserves a top award, especially because at the state level contest, we are trying to determine which projects will move on to the next level of competition. And there might be multiple judging groups. They might have to go through finals before they even get there. We don't want to leave them hurt and confused. So do not indicate ranking or do not indicate they should get an award when you write your evaluation, because then if that doesn't happen, then that's not gonna make them feel great. When you're writing, try to fill the space. Give them, enough that they can use when they're looking at reviewing their project. So example comments, you can see here, something like, interesting topic, very relevant in today's era of laptops, tablets, cell phones. This might have been a technology-based project. The exhibit itself is laid out in a clean and clear manner. So that's a great way to give them feedback on things that they did well. You could also say things like, work to expand your research into other categories of sources. Try to avoid using only websites in your secondary research. That's something for them to think, okay, that's something I can work on. So it should be phrased constructively, should be backed up with examples. I always try to think about it as I'm going to write my feedback in the order following the rubric. So I'll start with their thesis, they'll move to the theme, I'll talk about their research and provide feedback based on that. And connect back to that rubric, especially if you're going to mark them lower on a particular section, which is going to happen because you're going to rank a variety of projects. We ask that you help them make sense of what they see. So if you have marked them lower in wide research and maybe they're developing, why are they developing? Tell them that, right? They might not know right off the bat. They've been working on this project for a long time, and they're connected to it. So we want to make them understand why why the check marks are where they are. You want to end on a positive note to make them feel good. We want them to be happy and feel proud that they participated. Once you've completed those evaluations, you check in with Claire. She needs to ensure that you have all your evaluation sheets. It's going to function kind of like a checkout system. And once you've turned that in, you are dismissed for the day. So we want to make sure that Claire has all of that stuff before you leave the space. Okay. We're going to finish up here with where you can find more information to help you as we prepare for the contest. So we have a judge resource folder. We have a Google Drive that has a bunch of information in it. Not only does it include the theme book and the contest rulebook, we also have created a judging guide ourselves that provides basically this information in written form. I have an online feedback walkthrough video that talks through how to provide feedback online. I also have a written version of that as well. We have category instructions for every single category. We have examples of judge feedback, which I think can be really helpful if this is one of your first times writing feedback. Go look at those examples so you can kind of see what we're looking for. And then we also put the slides and make them available to you there. We also have a bunch of other stuff in there, just general reminders, other things to look at. It's a really great place to go and review to make sure that you feel prepared for contest day. All right, so we have reached the end. I thank you so much for sticking with me through all of this today. We will be reaching out in the next week with judge assignments and with information about how to access those judging materials. But if you have questions, you can contact Claire. Claire's email is on the screen. And then on contest day, that's going to be our phone number to reach us. We do not monitor that phone number prior to contest day. So please do not text that number prior to contest day and expect a response. We just don't monitor that number prior to contest day. It's only a day of phone. But that's the number. So if you have an issue while you're out while you're out judging, somebody will be able to answer your question on contest day. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we'll open it up to questions if there are any remaining questions. But thank you so much for taking the time to review our webinar today.